All right. Well, it's a few minutes after the hour, so Archana, if you're ready, I think we'll go ahead and get started. And folks that join will join, and they can get filled in on where we're at. So, good morning, everyone. My name is Craig Meadows. I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing at Volta. We're glad you're here today, and I really hope that you gain something from this conversation with us and Recovery Point about business process resilience. So we do want this to be as interactive as possible. So please stop us along the way with any questions or comments you may have. You can do so by raising your hand within your control panel there. And I'll come on the line and ask you to, or I'll ask you to unmute yourself through the panel or the control panel. And then you will be able to unmute yourself and ask your question, or you can always just put it in the chat box and I'll read those back to our panelists and presenters, and we'll address it in that way. So either way, whichever you're most comfortable with, we're happy to entertain those questions and comments. So thank you again for joining, and I'll turn it over to Archana Mehta with Recovery Point.
Thanks, Craig. So once again, I just want to say we're so excited to have you all here for this webinar today. My name is Archana Mehta. I'm the VP of Marketing at Recovery Point. And so what I want to do is just quickly walk everyone through the agenda. We've got a great panel here today to discuss Recovery Point's BPR solution and how it's really making an impact in the industry. So what we'll do is we'll kind of do an intro of our panelists, and then we'll do, Craig and I will just do like quick, short synopses on our mutual companies. And then we will have just a little bit of a deep dive into our business process resilience solution. And then we're going to spend most of our time today actually in panel discussion. So please have your questions ready. And as Craig said, like, please feel free to just stop at any time and or like raise your hand with a little icon at the bottom or type in your question. And yeah, we'll be sure to answer anything you have. So Craig, if you go to the next slide, I'll do an intro of our panelists. Awesome. So today we have Jeff Judy. He's Chief Cloud Architect for Recovery Point. We've got Matt Griffin. He's Pre-Sales Engineer at Volta. And we're so lucky to have Kevin Chen, who's the Team Lead of Infrastructure Systems at University of Louisville. So Craig, I will let you do a brief overview of Volta.
Sure. Thanks, Archana. So for those of you on the call that are existing Volta clients, we appreciate your continued partnership. And for those of you that aren't as familiar with Volta, I will run through that very shortly, very quickly here for you, and not get into all the details, but just so you kind of understand who we are and our role in this. So Volta is celebrating its 25th anniversary this year, having been founded in '96. So we founded our company mainly as an IBM solutions business partner, and really grew up in that model for about 15 years, all the while diversifying a lot of our offerings across a lot of OEM manufacturers. And then within about the last 10 years, really started diversifying our business in regards to professional service delivery and managed service delivery, which kind of brought us to the Recovery Point partnership because of our legacy with IBM manufacturer sales and those sorts of things. We had a lot of customers that had mainframes and storage and AIX systems. And when we were looking at a partnership to help grow services and to help our customers in those areas, Recovery Point was really the only company like theirs that had an offering to really support those heterogeneous environments all the way from mainframe to x86. So that could support all of our clients from the most complex environments to more of the simple environments. So that brought us here with the University of Louisville and being a longtime partner of ours and customer of ours. Thankful for that partnership, and for the last, I guess, almost 4 years has been a mutual customer of us and Recovery Point. So that's a little bit about us. We're based in Frankfort, Kentucky, with offices in Louisville, Kentucky, and Ashburn, Virginia. We have household client names like Urban Outfitters and Under Armour, but also support universities like University of Louisville and K-12 education, government agencies, utilities, and other Fortune 500 businesses. So that's a little bit about us and what we're doing as a company. So I'll turn it back over to you guys at Recovery Point.
Awesome. And thanks to I know we have a few clients on this call and hopefully a few future clients. So just a quick synopsis of Recovery Point. We're a leading national provider of DR platforms and solutions. We've been around for more than 30 years. So we started initially as a tape business, sort of tape recovery business. And then as DR evolved, so did we. We're a FSMA compliant and FedRAMP authorized provider, as well as Tier 3 certified for our infrastructure. And as Craig mentioned, we specialize in serving enterprises with complex heterogeneous environments. So last August, our founder sold the business to Abry, which is a Boston-based private equity firm. They're a sector-based private equity firm, and they've been very successful at that. We have locations in Maryland, Pennsylvania, and Illinois, and our flagship facility is located just outside the DC area in Germantown, Maryland. And we serve federal, state, and local governments, as well as commercial clients ranging from Fortune 500 to small businesses. And if there are, if there are any other questions about Recovery Point specifically, feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll make sure we address them before the end of the webinar. But yeah, now I'm going to turn it over to Jeff Judy to discuss business process resilience.
Thanks, Archana. And I see the presentation as just in PowerPoint. I don't know if everybody else sees it as there we go, thank you. All right, so I'm Jeff Judy. I do know some of you, some of the attendees, I recognize some names out there. I'm the Chief Cloud Architect with Recovery Point. I've been with Recovery Point for since 2012. Over that time span, I've watched RPS evolve from legacy restoration services like tape recovery to more modern DRaaS, cloud-based services involving replication and live failover. And the next logical step in moving forward with DR modernization is automation of as much as possible, really. Removing the human factor from the DR services and try to make it, as we say here, repeatable, reportable, and reliable. So BPR is our fully managed recovery service offering. When we say it's repeatable, reportable, and reliable, it's based on automation services. So what is repeatable is how we design the service. We build upon, or we build out what we call run books, which are sequences of tasks containing scripted code or built-in code to recover your application or your systems. They're constructed to restore your application system, or basically bring back the business functionality. And it's repeatable because we're able to execute these run books repeatedly over and over on a cadence or frequency on the schedule, and then be able to report on those results. So the reportability of the service is based around the execution of the run books. So when we execute on run books, we're able to track metrics such as when we started, when we completed, any errors, and report on the speed of the recoverability and the success factor across all of the applications. And this is a reliable service in the sense that since it's automated, we're able to remove the element of human error from executing on those tasks. So what you see here is a business process resiliency slide. Some of the built-in reporting functionality of the service gives you tiering and task sequencing. We're also able to give you, like I'm saying, runbook validation, status reports, and ad hoc testing. We can go to the next slide, Archana. So this is just high level, but we offer this as a fully managed service across all platforms. And our goal is really to automate as much as possible across all the platforms. Obviously, IBM Z, IBM I are kind of difficult IBM Big Iron services that are tricky to automate, but the AIX and x86 are well polished, and we're able to definitely fully recover across platforms. So yeah, thanks. Next slide. And then within this portal, we're able to provide a nice interface for graphically showing you recoverability of the systems or applications, success and failures. And what comes along with that is when we're in the middle of maybe executing a task, and say your company has a disaster, or you're in the middle of a DR test, and we're executing on the runbooks, we're able to quickly see if we have a problem, and then explore further on what erred out amongst your systems. So I wanted to stop for a second, really just kind of review, what DR services are. So DR services are based on recovery point objectives and tiering across those. So recovery point objectives and recovery time objectives. So what are RPO and RTOs? A recovery point objective is the amount of data that your business is willing to lose. And your business is only going to be as good as your last backup or your last replication cycle. Your recovery time objective is the amount of time that the business is committing to or desiring to recover your business functionality. And there's tiers within those recovery point and recovery time objectives. And associated costs as you move into more aggressive times to recover. So you may have like let's say you have a tier 1 application that is critical to your business, can only withstand maybe 5 minutes of data loss and must be recovered within 5 or 10 minutes. You would group that into a tier 1 level, and then as you move through the business criticality of applications, maybe you have an application that's not as critical to the business. You can sustain a day, 24 hours of data loss, and it could be recovered in, say, 48 hours. And you could group that into like a tier 2 or tier 3. So our services are designed around that approach. And the slide you're seeing here is, it's built within Smartsheet, and we use it as a collaboration tool amongst our clients. And we've built upon Smartsheet, it's called a DR tracker status. So when you're using the BPR service, we'll work with your team to complete the DR tracker, in the sense that we'll have application grouping. So on the left-hand side here, there's an application column. We'll construct the application groupings. Now within those application groups, you'll populate with your particular systems that need to be recovered. And then as you move to the right, we're able to mark if your system is going to be in scope for a DR test or out of scope. And then further to the right, we have application tiering groupings. So it's kind of hard to see, but there's, perfect, thank you. Server recovery tier levels and the recovery predecessor orders. So we work with your team to group the systems into the tiering, and then within those tiers, set the sequence or startup order, recovery order for systems and applications. And we take this information from this DR tracker, and then we import it into our BPR recovery portal, and then build out runbooks based upon this information. And if you go to the next slide, we have this is just a template, but it's an app track dashboard. So you're able to see in real time as we're executing, whether it's a true disaster event or a test event, a scheduled test event, but you're able to see in real time the recovery status of your applications. And also quickly see if we have a problem. So I've included like an issue problem for one of the applications in the lower right-hand side. you see at what time it failed, and then you can dive deeper into which particular execution sequence failed or a system had failed. If you go to the next slide, we will get into what the runbooks look like. So this is a visual representation of a typical runbook that we would design for a customer. Maybe you could zoom in just a little bit there. So it's really a workflow, a sequence of steps, and based on success or failure, you would move to a particular branch of the tree, and so we would start an execution of a runbook. It would begin a series of execution steps. If you could see there, there's like a start service. So in this example, we're starting a JBoss service on the third box over. If that's successful, it moves to the next execution sequence, and so on. It begins to move through the tree, begin to start a MySQL service as well. And as the workflow progresses, if it errors, it'll obviously notify you of the error in the dashboard. So this is the visual representation of a runbook. And the final slide, the next one here, is the actual steps that we would construct. So another kind of typical example of how we would construct a runbook. So you can see that it's just basically a series of events or tasks, and it's based on the recovery procedures that you would provide us. So I kind of ran through all of that really fast, and there's a lot that goes into a DR service on top of this automation layer. The BPR service is when we work with your team to construct these runbooks, like on a typical engagement, we'll collect the information that we require. So along with populating the DR tracker for an application level recovery, we're going to need to know and understand the nuances of the application, what's involved, are there web front end application systems involved, database backends, and then recovery procedures. So your company may already have documented procedures on how to recover a system, and we would take that documentation, review it, and our teams would work to import it into a runbook and create scripts around those tasks that have done manually in the past.
And Jeff, we have a question, which is, would the runbook include things like DNS changeovers and WAN configurations?
Yes, that's a good question. So let me see if I understood. So the DNS changes, definitely. A WAN cutover configuration. Can we get a little more clarity on that? Are we talking about like a physical cable swing from like one switch to the other?
Okay, it looks like firewall IPs mainly.
Firewall, yes. So if we can interface with a system, whether it be just an SSH session or if the system has an API interface, then we're able to run commands against it. So for DNS or even a firewall interface, say I know Cisco has some well-documented APIs. Also, you could get into you could remote in through an SSH session and just execute the commands to change IP addresses. So yes, we're able to make those changes. So what I was saying was we would take your documentation and then import it into these runbooks to create an automated process. So some of the benefits of this service are it's repeatable, reportable, and reliable, but the repeatable part of it, what comes along with the service, is we execute these on a quarterly basis to do runbook validation. In this sense, we're able to check to see if a runbook was successful 1 month and then the next month it failed, and we're able to go in and say, why did it fail? many times we uncover things have changed. So say a system was decommissioned, an application was upgraded, IP addresses were changed. These things need to be also put into your disaster recovery process needs to be incorporated into your change control, but that's forgotten sometimes or just a misstep, and we'll uncover it, and we can come back to your team and say, hey, you know, this runbook worked last month. Say we were recovering your web application. The SQL database came up fine. The web front end came up fine. This next month, the web service wouldn't start, or we're missing the web front end system altogether. It's no longer in your replication cycle. And you can go back and say, oh, you know, operationally, we decommissioned that system, put a new one in, but we forgot to put it into the DR replication cycle. So we actually had not sent the system to you. So those types of things are actually discovered all the time. And it's very helpful to be able to keep your state of DR readiness in sync with your production side. Along with that, we provide reporting. So with there's two levels to the service. I'm sorry, I should have said that up front, but there's two levels to this service. There's a foundational level and an application or enterprise level. With the foundational level, we recover all of your systems to a network accessible state and perform a health check, such as an ICMP check or some type of port validation check to make sure that the system's communicating on the network. When you move to the enterprise level of the service, it's full application recovery. That includes the foundational level, but on top of that, we recover to your application state of accessibility and then hand off to your team, to your end users to begin application validation. But it's reportable in the sense that on a quarterly basis, we run through runbook validation, and then we're able to provide you with a report of the results. What was errored, what was successful, speeds, timing for recoveries, things like that, so that we can stay within your desired recovery point and recovery time objectives and the service levels that we may agree upon.
I think it's a really good point that just in my experience, the desire to reach this state amongst mid and large enterprises is always there. The ability to execute, you usually have a hard push for about a month when all the different silos come together. And then when they actually realize how big of an elephant they have to eat, it tends to fall apart. Even if they get over that first hump, that second time when they have to revalidate it and nobody's got time to do it, that's where the real value of a third party coming in, to not be have silos pointing fingers at each other, but also to do the due diligence and say, everybody come together, let's revalidate this run book. We're going to take care of it and test it and give you proper insight as to what happened. That's really a step I rarely see large companies reach on their own.
Well, it looks like we've got another question here. Considering an entire hardware failure, what type of help does Recovery Point offer for failing back after the disaster is mitigated and new hardware is acquired?
Sure, failback is part of the design, and it's going to be built into the type of service that's being delivered. So it comes down to really what vendor are you using? If, let's say, you're using Commvault as a backup and replication service, or even Veeam. You have a full hardware failure, you fail over to Recovery Point, you finally recover all your equipment, you're ready to fail back. So you would reverse replication, and or you can recover from backup sets on a controlled, scheduled basis. You know, when the DR event happens, that's out of your control, and it's just you kind of, you know, quote unquote, hit the red button and do the failover. But once you're ready to come back, it can be in a more controlled fashion. Begin your replication back to your on-prem data center. Schedule some downtime if you need to bring the systems back over, and then, you know, begin to bring the applications back up within your data center.
Thanks, Jeff. And it looks like we've got another question here. What is the most aggressive RPO and RTO that you can achieve?
the RPOs will be 5 minutes or less. And again, it's dependent on the vendor. There are services out there, mostly asynchronous services, majority of them. And I mean, it's a broad range of stuff, but I mean, you could do storage array to storage array replication. There's software vendors like Veeam and Zerto. Zerto would be a more aggressive RPO and RTO. There are built-in solutions like VMware Site Recovery Manager that can give you 5 minutes or less of recovery point objective time. Of course, it's all based on your data rate of change and the amount of bandwidth you have between source and target. See, those kind of factor into how aggressive you can be. But you know, assuming you had all the bandwidth in the world and you could achieve a less than 5 minute recovery point objective. RTOs are very fast, especially with the replication services. So if you're replicating your VMs or even physical systems, and the target side is it's sitting there, the virtual machine is offline, but it's receiving replication all the time. It's essentially just a power on event to bring that system up, and then it's running. So with today's fast storage platforms like NVMe, systems come up lightning fast. So if you really wanted to achieve a 5 minute or less RPO RTO, you know, you could go with some very aggressive or high bandwidth connectivity and land on some like flash type storage.
Well, thanks, Jeff. I'd like to really kind of start our panel discussion a little bit here and bring in Kevin Chen with the University of Louisville. Kevin is the team lead of infrastructure systems at the university and a DRAS customer, as I mentioned, of both of ours. And so, Kevin, to provide a little bit of background, your department became interested in expanding upon your current DRAS contract and in implementing some of this BPR platform into your environment. Can you kind of tell us what led you all to take that leap, if you will?
Yeah, I can do that. Good morning to everyone out there. As I mentioned, my name's Kevin Chen. I'm the infrastructure lead and the lucky guy that gets to manage DR for the University of Louisville. We've been a customer of RPS for about 3 years now, a customer of Volta for probably since they began, and both have been good partners for us. Coming over to RPS in the last 3 years, we came from IBM shop that we did our DR with, and the services and things that I think that RPS has provided us has been very, very helpful the last 3 years in getting our DR infrastructure working in a smoother fashion for us because we're a small IT shop. We were heavily AIX. In the last 2 years, we pretty much got rid of everything AIX we have. So that provided us an opportunity to come over to the BPR product, the Gemini product, to do this the recovery process, because we changed all our databases from running on AIX to running on Linux and VMware. We do backups with the Veeam system, and we have a Veeam storage at the university. We have an identical device where actually we purchase storage space from RPS to do our Veeam backups there. So we do replication on a daily basis, you know, of Veeam data to RPS. So using the product was very, very helpful for us, being able to tie into that Veeam repository that we have there. Worked with Jeff and other people at RPS to get us going. You know, the smart sheet and getting all that information loaded in there. I think we had about 500 servers that we put in that we use for our process. And it is, as he mentioned, it is very important that the tiering and the application groups, the recovery predecessors, and also the startup order are very important in the way you do your recovery of your systems. We did our first kind of, like as Jeff mentioned, the quarterly test. We did our first test in January of this year where we did a small subset. You know, we brought up those servers, everything was perfect. You know, it came up really fast, got the results we needed because our first DR test was in February of this year. So literally about 4 weeks after we did our first practice test, we had our first DR test. And, you know, since we were doing a lot more machines and we'd been going back and forth on the way things should be set up in the tiering and things like that, we kind of came up with an idea of the way we thought it should be. And as DR came around, we kind of looked at that again as because the way we had our predecessors set up and recovery group set up, that kind of impacted the way some of the things we had recover. So that's one of those things that we're, you know, constantly monitoring and modifying to make sure we have the proper things in the proper tiers, also in the proper groups and the proper predecessors, because like Jeff said, that is important for the process of bringing things up and making a more smoother experience.
Thanks, Kevin. So, you know, you said you all just completed your first quarterly test and did that. So tell me your interaction with the BPR dashboard and what that looks like. Have you?
Yeah, like, you know, as Jeff described there and you had in the images, the dashboard gives you a lot of information. You know, you can see your machines in real time coming back as they're being, like I said, we already had our first DR with the product in February. So, you know, we recovered everything, you know, in a short amount of time, the way we had things set up. One of the things we kind of ran into, like I said, the predecessors, when you're doing the recovery predecessors, you set certain things, say this server needs to be up before, you know, say a database needs to be there before the application servers or web servers and things like that. So you have those different orders of the way you want things to come up. We didn't do the application recovery piece of it. We more just stuck with bringing back our servers and, you know, doing the ICMP checks, as Jeff said, to make sure things are available. You know, and you have to go over that information. Like it's a lot of information you have to put in to make sure things are going to work smoothly for you. And you just have to, like you said, when you're doing those testing, you need to look at the orders that you bring things up to make sure it fits what you need it to do.
Yeah, I agree. The hard work is the upfront planning. The DR tracker really helps with that to help University of Louisville and clients be able to see group their systems in the order that they want recovered, and then it can show you where you have a gap.
Yeah, and I know one of the things that we having that tracker when you're doing the DR process is, you know, you're seeing machines coming back, you're getting those times, how long it takes for those machines to be recovered, and then if there's issues, those machines stand out on that chart. It's very easy to see, okay, we got a red here, what's going on with that machine. So we had a few machines that are special cases for us that we have set up in certain ways, and you know, the machine came back, but maybe the network wasn't set to the right network piece or something like that. So there's quirks that we have in our internal setup that necessarily we had to make sure we reflected that in our DR recovery process too. Because like you said, the data you get back is only as good as the data you put in with things like this. So, you know, and that helps you catch those little quirks and things like that you may not have thought about, that, you know, every day, oh, okay, I do it this way. But when you're in a DR situation and it's not necessarily exactly the same way you have it locally, those things show up. So, you know, to document that and make sure, okay, in the DR situation, we need to make sure we have this. And then, you know, we tell the people there at the RPS that, hey, this is what we had to change or whatever like that. And so, you know, making those changes are quite easy. And like I said, we did it on the fly during a DR test. So we basically have a 24-hour window to get everything back. You know, we met that with flying colors. So.
Okay. Thanks, Kevin. Matt, you know, you deal with a lot of Volta customers that are probably a lot like a lot of recovery point customers. You know, what do you feel is the inhibitor of why we're not, you know, this is obviously the next level of DRAS, right? What do you think companies could start doing now to kind of help lay some of the groundwork to be able to take the next level into BPR and have some of that automation around their disaster recovery?
Yeah, that's a good question, Craig. I think the primary thing is that, again, talking about silos, you're going to have the DBA group, the networking group, the server group, the storage group. Depending on how big you are, you may have completely different groups for all those pieces. And all those pieces have to come together for a successful recovery. So documenting even inside the silos is going to be extremely helpful. If the DBA group can define what their idea of a successful recovery looks like, and the same with the storage and the network and the server, then RPS can come in, Recovery Point can come in and consolidate that, put it in a common language, and then obviously process it through their systems to be able to bring it all together into a cohesive, big red button. We declare a DR event. Let's get the run book going, and all the disparate pieces come together. Again, with that a little bit more of overarching control, rather than the DBA group having to do their thing and calling up the networking group to now do their thing, and then calls the storage group to do their thing, or however the usual DR panic goes. Having those processes predefined makes improving them much easier, for one thing, because that's most of the upfront work. So that would be my recommendation, is every group should already have within their own silo a well-defined A to Z of what failure to success looks like.
Thanks, Matt. Are there any other questions from the attendees? I want to make sure we grab those.
Jeff, I'll ask you a question. We're hearing this terminology being thrown out nowadays called drift management. Could you speak a little bit to what that is, and then how the BPR solution can really help clients manage that?
Yes, thanks, Archana. Yeah, so we talk about drift management, and what that is what I was discussing earlier, but it's where your application or system has changed over time. Like I was saying, maybe there was an upgrade or a system was decommissioned. Something has changed in the environment, which is the production environment has drifted and is out of sync from what your DR environment is ready to provide. So with drift management, it's change control. So part of our process is to establish a change control meeting cadence with your team to review changes and capture new changes. And we would set up the frequency based on everybody's schedules and availability. Maybe it's bi-weekly, maybe it's once a month or quarterly, but the goal is to maintain, to stop any drift between production and disaster recovery.
Okay, we have another question here. Do you see customers using Zerto or something similar for only a database server and Veeam, or other backup for the rest of the environment? I ask because we need a higher RPO than RTO.
Yes, definitely. There's usually a blend of services, and it's based on the tiering structure I was talking about. So if you have a tier 1 system with a very aggressive RPO and RTO, and then tier 2 is less, that is reflected, those aggressive RPO RTOs also reflect in the cost of the solution. So you may not need to buy the Cadillac of a solution and for all of your systems. So you can blend the services. So Zerto might be the solution for the database server that you can't withstand more than a couple minutes loss of data. And then you can tier down to Veeam or some other less aggressive recovery point objective service and save some money too.
Yeah, I mean, I think CDP, continuous data protection, is probably something that its time has come, not only for recovery, but for ransomware and malware recovery. It's a layer that right now in our security as a service offering, it's a layer that typically the hackers aren't able to go after. They're not aware of it, or it's just not part of the low-hanging fruit. So we've known of a number of customers with CDP products like Zerto, or Veeam has it in version 11, or Dell EMC's Recovery Point for VM, where they got compromised on their production systems, they got compromised on their storage and their backups, but they didn't get compromised on their CDP system, so they're able to recover very easily. So it's really kind of a, this is all significant parts of a nutritious breakfast, to make an old Saturday morning cartoon joke. But yeah, Zerto at the database level makes sense for a number of things. That's your real data. That's what any type of bad actor is going to be going after. So CDP not only enables you to recover and protect from ransomware, it also is really the highest level of asynchronous replication. We're assuming that you're not going to be within synchronous milliseconds of RPS's data centers. Maybe you are, maybe you aren't. Maybe you have 2 data centers that have synchronous, but you need a third. So that's going to be the highest RPO and RTO achievement you can get, outside of that 5 or 10 millisecond boundary.
Okay. Archana, were there any other questions you wanted to ask? Or I don't see any others from the panelists or from the attendees, but glad to take those as we still have some time left. Kevin, I think you answered it, but I feel like it would be bad of me not to ask. But I feel like you are very satisfied. I don't want to put words in your mouth, obviously, but how this BPR and automated recovery has kind of elevated your disaster recovery plans and testing and so on and so forth. I mean, would you agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, we're a small IT shop. My team, we have 6 guys. So we manage all the servers, the VMware, Isilon, Veeam. We manage everything basically except the network and the databases. So, having the BPR process was really helpful. It took a lot of work we didn't have to do up front. We'd already mapped it all out with Jeff and their team, things that need recovered, order needed recovered in. So that took that and building of a lot of the stuff that they do up front, because we basically did our DR where we did everything from scratch to see how this would work in the process. Because usually in a test you say, okay, well, we'll need these things up front, and RPS builds it for you, and then you just kind of get into the test. But we said we wanted to see how long it would take if we said we have a disaster, start now. And like I said, going through the process, spun up everything based on the way we worked it out and how we had to set up in the smart sheet and everything like that, and it went smooth. Like I said, you just have to be cognizant of the way you have things set up in your tiers and the orders and things like that, to make things go even faster. We saw there were some issues in the way we set some things up that kind of backed up other things that we know we're going to rework the order the way we have things come up. But yeah, we very happy with that. Like I said, it worked really good. We just, next we'll just do a little test here in probably another month or so to change some of those things we had last time that we saw that were problems.
Yeah, Kevin's service was unique in the sense that it was not replication, but it was restore from backups. So there's no cloud, there's no resources available. He said, and his team said, start from scratch and see what happens. And it's basically provision everything when the clock starts. So there's no ESXi hosts or storage presented. There's no networking. Everything started when the clock started. So it was good to see, and we were able to automate most of that approach. Outside of swinging some network cables over to the DR side of connectivity, but provisioning ESXi hosts for target recovery, target storage, setting up the Veeam system, VBR system to begin the restoration, and then executing all the recoveries and changing the network. So there's a lot that went into it. It was good to see it was successful.
Yeah, that sounds like something that also you could bring back home, knock on wood, it never happens, but in the event of an actual facility loss, that level of start from nothing and build it up can be applied to bringing the production site back online, essentially, unboxing servers and racking networking equipment, et cetera, et cetera. The work they've done with RPS, if they lost a facility, would be valid for bringing up production, not just running at RPS.
Yeah, that was our goal, to see how long it would take us to go from nothing to University of Louisville. And like I said, the biggest, like the first thing you want to have out there is your website. So we got that up. That's one of our first things we have come up. So basically it took us an hour because we had to get, like I said, all the background networking and ESXi and VBR, all that stuff built up. But once that was there, we started doing our restores through the system. That's one of the first servers that comes up. So ding, U of L website web servers back up, the website's out there. So at least that part of it, we know we were back from zero in a little bit over an hour. So that was one important thing.
Wow. Super compelling stuff. Well, Kevin, I appreciate your time walking us through your experience with this application recovery and with Recovery Point and Volta. So I appreciate your time. I appreciate all the panelists' time, and hopefully attendees. I hope you guys got something out of this event. We thank you all so much for taking the time to attend this event this afternoon or this morning. And if you have any other questions, we can answer those right now, or if something comes up after the fact, you can always reach out to someone on the Recovery Point team, on the Volta team. We would be more than happy to answer those questions and route them to the appropriate place. So thank you again.